the advertisement for the event we're having today, which is a special storytelling time with Alan Dull. And I wanted to let you know that he came into our world about a year ago when we received an email from this strange person from Edmonds who wanted to know about his family's history in Everson. So Marv and I went to his home, all these wonderful pictures that he had opened up to us by opening a Pandora's box of memories from his past. And they all had to do, or most of them had to do with the crossing, which was before Everson. And Marv has selected some of the prime examples of the work, and they're shown here, and they're in a memory case, which is right at the beginning of the center here. And before I introduce him, Alan Dull, I want to give you some basic history. L.C. Durr, his dad, and his grandpa, and a bachelor friend, Henry Burfeind, had teamed up to form a retail establishment in what became Bellingham. It was in Whatcom then, on 800 Holly Street, and Henry had been owned the quarry, sandstone quarry, and most of you have seen the sandstone around Bellingham and all over the Puget Sound. It all came out of that quarry that Henry Burfeind was leasing at the time, and he sold it to Roth and Roeder, and they took over in 1888. And so then they moved, Henry moved with the Durrs to a homestead on what is now called Central Road. And they still ran the store in Bellingham. And then they came out to the crossing. We know that they were here at least by 1899, according to the digest at that time. And they bought, in 1904, they bought 2 tracts of land, upon which they built their store. And then they had both their stores for a short period of time, and then they stayed in town. And now I want to point out a confusion I had. I've always, at first I was always calling him Alan Durr, because the store was named Durr and Burfeind. And then I came across the fact that his name was really Dull. And this is the delightful lady whom was the cause of all that, because she was a Durr, but she married Dull. And so he is known as Alan Dull. And so with that, Alan, I would like you to start telling us why you became interested in Everson.
Okay, well, I only had a few chances to come here, and it wasn't until I was probably over 30 years old that, we were coming back from Harrison Hot Springs, and my mom drove us through, we went to Sumas border crossing, and then drove us through to Everson, and we saw there was a building where her brother used to have a Texaco station, and of course the store, and then we drove by the farm on Central Road, and so it was, of some interest. And then later in life, it began to have a little more significance, I guess. Just how your focus changes. And my mom passed away last September after about 6 years of dealing with Alzheimer's and suffering through that. But so in the process of looking at pictures for her memorial, it kind of piqued my interest even more. But I'd already contacted these guys about trying to find out more, whatever I could, about especially my grandfather's store, which I only knew, bits and pieces of details. So I was going to read you a little bit of what background I wrote down, since I'm the grandson of L.C. Durr, and his youngest child and only daughter was my mom, Betty. So there were 4 sons before her, and 3 of them were educators eventually. And the youngest was also a lieutenant commander in World War II and aboard several aircraft carriers that were either sunk or nearly sunk in the Pacific Theater, and the Franklin was one of them. I had the pleasure of seeing the farm Mom lived on her early years several times after I was in my 30s, and also the old Texaco building near the bridge, which I see is now for sale. And it was her brother Carl who had a service station back there in the 20s. Now, I never had a chance to meet him because he was killed in an experimental airplane crash in 1932. Big fan of aviation. Anyway, recently this mercantile called Durr and Burfeind has been of interest to me since going through my grandmother's old photos. So with the help of Jim and Marv, I learned that it actually had several locations on Main Street, and one of them was where a store still stands that sells small tractors. And I can recall my grandmother mentioning that place a few times when I was young. But I understand that Grandpa got out of the business in favor of the farm on Central Road where my mom was born. And Grandpa died prematurely around 1936. So the farm had to be sold, and the family moved into a house in Bellingham on Garden Street that my Uncle Hank designed while at Western Washington. So those were tough times for Gaga, my grandmother, but she never let on to me that they were. And also, I was going to say, the story of how Lewis courted her was pretty interesting to me because my grandmother, Minnie, was a switchboard operator, and so L.C. Durr would call in, and she'd handle his calls, and I guess he kind of liked the sound of her voice, so he asked, he asked a friend to find out who she was, and that's how it all started. And so eventually he got a date, and the rest was history. But
And what was her name?
Minnie.
What was her last name?
Well, it was Dingledine before that. Minnie Matilda Dingledine. But
There was one story about your past that I thought would be interesting, about the typhoid in 1890. It killed 4 members of the family.
okay, yeah. What do you want to know about it?
Most people have not had that kind of tragedy in their family. And
Right. Well, there was an assortment of tragedy, because I know that there was another brother that died very young after having been burned by fire or a stove or something, so that, and then of course my mom's dad died in his 60s from heart failure that resulted from using some kind of electronic device to treat rheumatism. So shortly after that, the farm had to go. So back to Bellingham. That's
Okay.
just tough times.
Excuse me for interrupting. I just wanted to mention about that.
That's
Go on.
okay. So I thought, well, if I put together a little photo album, maybe I can show some of these. I don't know if you're able to see that, but
Let me zoom in here. Yeah, I think we can get it.
okay, Durr and Burfeind, and there's the gas station, and I superimposed Uncle Carl pumping gas there. So that's the building that still sits there. It's changed a lot, but that would be my grandma, Minnie. We knew her as Gaga. And here on the left is my mom and her brother Chuck, who would later become, he was in the Navy and also a teacher over in Wenatchee for a number of years. So, another early photo of my mother sitting on a hood of a car over by Weiser Lake, when she really got a kick out of. And then one of my grandmother's early photos of downtown Everson. And this one shows the house that they later lived in on South Garden Street. And there's an old photo of the 4 siblings that remained. So, anyway, where else can we go with
This
this?
is the, you want to talk about,
Well, this is a little poster I made for the display case, and it shows, well, first of all, I should thank Alan for letting us come to Edmonds and photograph his personal album, and I don't take that lightly. And so this was a casual check, and what this is, the first maps were Sanborn maps. And this is a 1917 logo, I should say, of the map. And Jim's going to show you where the location of the store was located. Maybe you can explain a few things about that.
Sanborn was fire insurance maps. The fire insurance company was Sanborn, and they drew maps of the town, including all the buildings, so that they could insure them. And they are an invaluable source all around the world, around the United States. And this is one of their maps showing what we now call Old Everson, which is west of the tracks. And you can see, this was the Texaco station that he was talking about, his uncle's place. And this was Carl's service station on the corner. This was their first store, and this was their second store. So, and their house was right beside the store. And that was the Presbyterian Church, and then the Nap store, and the Everson Hotel was in there.
And this is show exactly where
This
I
shows
made
what's there
this,
now.
where it's at now. If you can, maybe you can explain where it is, Jim.
Okay, this is looking east.
Or
This
I
is the
can.
mountain. This is your house over here, down there, down the road. This is where the Toons live. And this is the second store, which is now a tractor place. The hotel was on this side, and then their store was next. And this is blown up, but it was right here where these two houses are. And this is the corner. The corner. His one uncle was on this corner, and the other station was over here. So that's the.
Can I add something? Alan wanted to know exactly where the store was, and we kind of did too. And this is where Jim came up with a Sanborn map, and it does have, on the 1917 map, it has roughly the size of the building. So what we did is I got some bright orange cones from the city of Everson, and so we met one Saturday morning. Alan came from Edmonds, and Jim and I came next door, and we measured it all out, and Jim had the specifics, and we took pictures, and it helped us exactly locate where the store was. And then I kind of made this picture here so it'd be better to tell where it was.
This is the way he's already shown you the map. This is maybe a little better quality, but this was their first store. Was right here. This is the Everson Hotel here, and this is where their second store was. And this was the church. Church was moved here in 4 or 14. 4, because this. No, it was before that, because this picture is supposed to be 1892, and this was the Nap store. Everson's house is down here, but this is the area we put our cones down, so we could see what was there now. Basically, their house is there now, and this is another picture of that first store.
You have a question over here.
Wait, go ahead, keep going, you want to stop.
You what?
The church,
Yeah.
you said moved there.
Yes.
You see the
It was
train,
at the crossing.
the train tracks
Yeah.
Came in about 1892, didn't they?
It was moved there by 1892. The first church was built there in 78 or so, 78, 79. Was built at the crossing.
If anybody's crossing over those train tracks, I was wondering how they ever did that.
Hmm?
If anybody was crossing over the train tracks trying to move a church, but it was.
No, this one, they didn't move this. Yeah, they did move this one. They moved it over there, no, they built a new one over there in 37.
And that's
No, they moved it in 14, and then they built, their church burned and down in
Yeah.
37. They rebuilt it.
But-
I don't know. Anyhow, this church moved a couple times, but this is where it was at the time that Burfeinds and that they were there. Show some of the people that collected on the front steps of the store.
But the store was a general store. They sold merchandise, they sold everything. And the store, if you wonder where this is looking west, by the way. If you didn't know, I'm kind of clarify that slightly.
Yeah,
And,
taken from the tops of the railroad track.
yeah, where the railroad tracks used to be,
That's right, they aren't there anymore.
this is, yes.
I keep forgetting they
Well-
take these things away. They take the landmarks away, and how do you find anything anymore? This was the post office that was in their store. If you're looking real close at the floor, you can still see the marks in where the walls were of this particular store.
The post office was in his store, and Lewis C. Durr was postmaster of Everson. He started March 20th, 1906, and his last day was, believe this or not, was March 14th, 1915. And this explains, but also, what amazes me is this family did so many things. That's what amazes me.
So Jim, can I ask, my understanding is that photo and this floor, that's part of the building that still sits down here.
Correct.
So when the one time I went in there and I was asking the employees about it, they said, yeah, they'd heard that there used to be a store and a post office, and they even showed me the marks on the floor where that post office counter sat, you know. And
Actually, I think the post office was in your first store, too. And then they
Yes.
moved it to the corner
That's correct.
where Carl's service station was.
okay,
And then they moved it to the store where the second store.
The second store was like Everson Farm Equipment, if we're correlating here, if you know where that was.
Ellen Boss,
Ellen Boss, you know where Ellen Boss is?
yeah.
Well, anyway, the locals would know, but, okay,
Yeah, it's been a bunch of things.
okay.
Okay. This shows the homestead on the Central Road. I'm gonna hold up that one. This shows the map of it, and that shows the picture of it.
This is a Google picture of the barn, and I drew this map, and this shows on the Central Road. It's about, go down the Mission Road, you hit the Central Road, which is to the
There it
west,
is.
and go about a mile down there, and on the south side is the Durr barn is still there. That's all that's left. This barn is huge.
It's right on the edge of the road. You can't miss it.
and they still grow berries there.
They'll grow berries there.
Yes.
As you can see, they have this piece, and this piece. This piece is subdivided now, and there are houses in there. This is Faison Lake. So,
I heard, by the way, I'll interject here a minute, that at least 260 to 280 acres total. And I had some other things, but they had a dairy, and I just brought, and he had, on this certificate here, 1924, let's see, this is 20, anyway, I'll let you look at that, John. They had like 55 females and like 1 to 2 bulls. They had that many animals, and that was huge for back then. And one thing that they had a huge orchard that had numerous apple trees, everything in it. And,
This is the house, isn't it?
yes,
I believe so.
This is the homestead house on that. So,
I think that's my great-grandmother and probably my great-grandfather, so I believe that's Minnie's parents.
now some of you may recognize this without the bay on it. But in Everson in 1927, this is
I put that little,
the Texaco station.
I got that stuck up there. That's actually period sign for
Can
1927.
you bring a picture of you in a motorcycle sitting here?
Yeah, I got that in back. I got that.
Photoshopped, right.
Oh, I thought that was a real one.
Anyhow,
Or time travel, I'm not sure.
he did a little time travel.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
No, this is a different one, but he
Well,
did a
anyway.
little time travel here. He's showing you in this, 1918,
1907.
I think it's
1907 picture. Here's this guy riding by on his motorcycle.
Which looks like a 2008 model Kawasaki.
2008 model Kawasaki, and then looks like Alan Dole sitting on the thing riding.
It's hard to tell.
And you notice everybody's looking at him? How about that?
Yeah.
But anyhow, this building is still here. You want to tell them about the doors? And
Oh, about the service station? Yeah, I did some history on that. But anyway, the service station, the kind of the triangle right across from Everson Farm Equipment, it's how I'll go
where
on
the
that.
where
Right
the
across from the store.
ice cream store is now.
And there was actually, at one time, there was two service stations there. The one on the corner and then the one on the same side, just down slightly. And
Still painted white.
I made this morning before church, so, but anyway, and John can get on this and you can see the map. Well, I can't see through it. This is a big, large map I have. And this is, oh, I see your motorcycle's in there again, I
It
see.
gets around, yeah.
It gets around.
It's sitting there right where it would have been pumping gas into it if we were back in
The bays have been
the
removed.
20s.
And
This
what,
is what the bays looked like
yes,
before. So he's parked his motorcycle right there by the pumps.
and I
So you
should say,
Take
go
those two and
ahead.
you can see what he did.
And basically what this is where the door used to be, that's all you see now.
This door.
That door there.
door here.
And so I made up a little sheet on that. It's just because.
You can see the outline of the door in the concrete, but
Yeah.
it's all walled in now.
Yes.
But the window's still there. And I think the doors have been, is the door still there?
Well, there's, that door has been turned into a window, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, the building's had a for sale sign on it for quite a while. I hope some investor comes along and sees potential to do something
I did look up
clever with it.
when the, real estate, and it said the building was built in 1927. And that picture you had was in 1927, so
Brand new.
evidently brand new. And this just shows a picture I took of the outline, a little, this is hand-drawn, but it just, and I actually like the grass at the bottom, actually, too.
Was that the first
This is,
car and everything?
this was in the, there was 3 memoir, I guess you'd say, books. And this was in there, and I read part of it, and it says that this was the first car in Everson. And I was telling Alan before we started, I don't know what you'd do in the winter times when you drove, because you would get wet and it'd be awfully cold. But anyway, it's a 1911 brush. And I think, Jim, you've heard of that, didn't you say, the brush car?
I
did.
have heard of the brush car.
Oh, okay. You didn't have one in 1911
No,
then?
I-
Okay. But
Only
anyway.
the Durrs had a car in Everson in
Oh,
1911.
okay. But anyway, that's what it said in the memoirs, and I thought, well, we need to step up here, and by the way, it says John George Durr, so that's all we know. But I thought it was kind of neat, so anyway.
Very good. Now, tell us a little bit about your family, either on the farm or in the town. You had stories to tell us about your family.
Oh,
Your
well,
grandparents' family, I guess you'd say, and your mother.
yeah, well, there's documentation. I know one booklet you've had written by my Uncle Hank, who was the oldest of the Durr children, that era. And, it just describes growing up in Everson and the farm and getting up early to milk cows and going to the normal school, I guess it was called, and friendships and maybe his first date and, things like that. But, the stories about my Uncle Carl, who was the aviation enthusiast. And I spent 32 years working for Boeing as a technical illustrator and graphics person, so there's that connection. Must have been the aviation bug must have been in the DNA. But so Carl was studying aviation at the University of Washington, and he had built this glider, which was eventually became a motorized experimental airplane, powered by a motorcycle engine, and he was flying it, doing a test flight out of Boeing Field, and there was a chase plane, and they were filming, and so one of the struts broke, the wing gave way and crashed, and he was killed at the age of 22, back in, I believe it was 1932.
That's correct.
Yeah, so, that was another one of the tragedies that the Durr family endured. And I have some of the newspaper clippings about that. And also my grandmother saved the watch he was wearing, and how that was the last time it worked, I believe, too. So I have that in my possession at home. It's one of the family heirlooms. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, my mom didn't write things down. She told us stories about the farm. I have pictures of her as a little girl playing with kittens and stuff like that. But
When they built the store, first they were living on the farm, right?
I'm not sure.
They didn't build the residence till later and moved to town. They lived at the farm.
Yeah, it could be. There was a lot of moving, it seemed like, but there was Bellingham residences, and Everson, and the farm, and it's all a little complicated. Hard to keep track of all the moves, But
It was pretty interesting, though, that a lot of people who had businesses in Bellingham had homesteads elsewhere. They lived elsewhere, and most of the homesteads are out this way because we had the better land. And then because there were not many homesteads in Bellingham except in Happy Valley.
Mhm.
You lived in Happy Valley for a while too, didn't you? Or did you?
Me?
I know.
The Durrs?
The Durrs.
It's possible, but I have a lot of my grandmother's old mail, and most all of it has the South Garden Street address. And, some of it was past due notices on property taxes and things like that. So this is what happens,
Yeah. In the old days, there wasn't any credit, was there?
Well, not officially. I mean, it was, you had to arrange that in person, I suppose. But, they managed, they got through, and ultimately, my mom married my dad in 1950, April of 50. So by then, she was, I think, the last one to have lived out here in the Bellingham area, because her brothers were older, and so they they married their wives, and one was in Wenatchee, one was in Tacoma, and Hank lived in a assortment of places like Mount Vernon and even Camino Island for a while. But yeah, it was
Your uncle
difficult.
who wrote the memoir, though, was in town at least till 15, wasn't he? Or he's in there longer than that. He was 27.
Yeah, probably. I don't remember all the dates, but
I read that memoir. It's very. Someday, if I ever get around to writing the Everson books, there's going to be a lot of information that come out of that, because he's the only person I've ever known that wrote a first-hand report of what it was like living in Everson from about the 1880s, 90s to at least into the 20s. And he was very, very, very candid about what he wrote, and he wrote very specifically about what girls he saw and what he was doing. It's a priceless document. But the Durr family was, Elsie, her grandpa, was a teacher, at least by 1899. So, and I think one of his aunts was also a teacher down in Seattle. So they were very well educated for people of that day. And the fact that they had this store, and Henry stayed with them the whole, and he died in 51, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Henry
Burfeind.
Burfeind.
Oh, that sounds about right.
He was a bachelor, but he stayed with Elsie for over half a century in various business operations, and then lived with them here in Everson until he died. So they're all buried in Bayview, though. So they're not buried out here. They.
By the
Yeah,
way,
the only time I was at Bayview, I think, was for my grandmother, Minnie's funeral, and that was in May of 1978. So.
but Chris and I, wife and I, we went to Bayview Cemetery, and I didn't bring any pictures of the stones, but we went and cleaned them all for Alan and everything. So
Much appreciation.
yeah, we wanted to do a photo shoot, and that was the proper way to do it. And I thought what was neat, I didn't bring a picture, but the Durrs are all together in one big horizontal stone. I mean, it's separated by each person's name, but it's just amazing. And so we did that. And I'll backtrack on by the way, the Lewis Durr, when he taught school, it was in Clearbrook. That's number 13.
Yeah.
And started in 1897. And I don't know how far he went, but Jim was right. 1899, they had a big convention in town, and it mentions his name there, of all the teachers and everything. He was one of them. I just found that. So, and other things, it just seems like as you go through the memoirs, actually the display case has them in there. The three, the Hank one, has what they call the early days, and then so on and so forth. But when you read these, there's so much to read that it's hard to keep up with dates and everything, but it's just amazing that someone would have a history track record of the family. You just don't see this. So as we're backtracking here, what Jim just said, it still amazes me to see something like this. And it's like, well, it's living history, and basically you just can't get enough of it. So anyway, I just thought I would add those three things in there.
And another thing on my grandfather, L.C., we have some of the letters he wrote my grandmother at home, and he was really smitten. These were very well written love letter kind of things, and he poured it on. So, yeah, he was not only an educator, but yeah, he probably could have been an author too. Of some kind of novels. But he was a smart man. So,
Well, and her brother that wrote that memoir, or that was his brother.
well, no, that was his son Hank.
Oh, he's his son, Hank.
Yeah, he wrote all those stories.
So
Yeah.
but he could talk about going to Normal too, so didn't he? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, he went to Normal too, so that means he must have been teacher, or at least aspired to be a teacher.
Yeah, yeah, he did. I think they all taught for a while. Hank, Chuck, and John. John lived in Milton and was a high school biology teacher for most of his career. So, yeah, of that era generation, they're all gone, but except for Chuck's wife is still living over in Spokane, and she's in her 90s also. So.
That's why your interest is very important, because they're not here to tell us the stories anymore.
Yeah, I tried to ask as many questions as I could while my mom was still around. So,
Did she tell stories? My mother told stories.
Oh yeah, she did. Of course, later in life, you didn't know if she had the story straight, but prior to, I don't know, 2006 or so, you could count on the information being good. So yeah, there were little stories of life on the farm and Bellingham and how she worked during the war. There was a place that made bunk beds for the soldiers, and she was working a night shift there in Bellingham on the waterfront somewhere.
That was World War One?
World War II.
World War Two.
Yeah. So, she would have been 18, 19, 20, somewhere in there. But, yeah,
I never heard about a bed manufacturing in Bellingham before.
well, only like a war period as
We
needed.
built the mosquito fleet, the wooden boats.
Really?
The PT boats.
Okay.
But
Like PT-73, McHale's Navy.
I forgot them. We built a couple hundred of them anyway. Down there where the whole cold storage is now. We did a lot of things, but if somebody doesn't tell anybody about them, we don't know that they ever existed, because it existed for a period of time and then they're gone. Just like CSKO Canning Company in Everson. Big in business for 50 years, but then it just disappeared.
Yeah, and another thing that I would have liked to have found out about, I had that picture, you've seen it, of my mom standing on the landing gear of an old airplane, 1932 vintage, probably the last place she went with her late brother Carl. And I've asked around, and where was this? Some air show somewhere in the Bellingham area. Some people think, well, it might have been the Tulip Field airstrip, or it might have been Ferndale, but that's something I'd like to ultimately find out. This airplane was 1928 Golden Eagle Chief, I found out, and a Boeing friend of mine who's a good history buff, he's the one who researched that, and he found, well, there were only 3 of them, 3 or 4 that were sold in the Washington area, and one crashed and one flew to Canada, and he tracked down that exact airplane, and it's currently owned by a collector in Illinois somewhere, and he put me in touch with him, and I have it on my to-do list to go there and get a photo taken with that airplane, but the guy actually emailed me some pictures of it in its restored condition. So
Wow.
it's amazing what you can do if you...
Did you Photoshop yourself on the strut the same way as your mother?
No, not yet, but if I can't make arrangements, I haven't been able to reach the guy by email or phone lately, so it might come to that. I don't know. But I'd like to at least see it. I'm not sure if I want to go in for a ride in an airplane that old, because I don't want to be the second in the Durr family, the Durr-Dull family, to lose their life in a small airplane.
But you don't want to be less than your mother in courage.
That's true. So I'll think about it. But first, I have to get there to see the thing. Make sure it's in good condition.
Wow. Wow.
Are there any other artifacts that we haven't talked about that you think would be important or interesting? You have so much in that storage of yours, in your collection.
Well, yeah, I mean, most of it is that one box of documents that contained everything from, receipts for real estate taxes, and there was some stock paperwork. There was bills from even Bayview Cemetery for
You want to show it, or
maintenance,
it's up to you?
things like that. But
I do have a picture of that if you wanted me to show the box, just to give them
sure, go ahead.
it's in there somewhere.
There's the box.
That's the box.
That's the front of it. Maybe you can show it up for
That's
John.
the inside of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, going through this box of documents and scanning things, it was,
Well, you can find out an awful lot about how they lived by the documents that they saved
That's true.
and what was important to them. And you have kept them. So many people have destroyed them,
That's true.
let them go by the wayside.
well, these things are, they're interesting. If nothing else, just you look at the handwriting that they used with their fountain pens and,
Fountain pens, they used feathers and homemade ink.
okay,
I still have an envelope of ink that my great uncle got, and you mixed it with water to make the ink that you put on the paper, and they actually took feathers and sharpened them up and used the feathers to write with.
you would know better than me, but yeah, it's
Are you suggesting that I'm that old that I would remember?
just a little older than me, I'm pretty sure, but,
But I think of that because I was using pens before the fountain pen. The fountain pen was new. I remember the fountain pen was one of those things that leaked when you had it in your pocket.
yeah.
Anybody ever have shirts that they had big blotches of ink on the front because the one you had in your pocket leaked? That's what fountain pens I remember.
That's true.
Certainly.
But with those, the old timers had these ink wells in our desks, and we dipped them in, and then sometimes we got the girls' hair that we dipped in there too. So
Big deal.
So I guess I could throw in, I touched on Uncle Chuck, my mom's closest brother, who was in the war, and I know he was on the Franklin, the aircraft carrier Franklin, which, after doing some research, I learned it was the most heavily damaged carrier in the war that didn't sink. But I think before that he was also on the Wasp, and which did, I believe, was sunk. He was on at least one that actually did get sunk, and he survived those kind of episodes. So, yeah, I remember he's been gone since the late 90s, but I remember getting some interesting stories from him about just the war, the Pacific War, and what that was like. And so, yeah,
that's not
Those-
something you want to repeat either.
no. But, yeah, certainly learned from.
Now, is he the one that had the service station on the corner?
No, that was Carl,
Carl.
who died in the experimental airplane crash.
So he was pretty young when he had that service station.
Yeah, I think he was,
Had to be in his 20s or very
early
teens,
20s,
or
yeah.
early 20s.
might have been 20 years old, because he was only 22 when he died in that crash. So
Did he work in the other station, the Texaco, or before that?
I don't know. He might have. I didn't ask that question.
I wonder when Chelsea Hill acquired that station.
You what?
Chelsea Hale, when he acquired that station.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If it was,
Because of course, that's where the post office triangle building was, and
Yeah.
they tore it down
Post
and then they
office
built a
was
service
there.
station.
That's correct.
I remember because I was working with highways, and we always wondered where the tanks were. And found out the tanks were out in the highway right away. So they never had to worry about tanks because there's no room for tanks on their property. Their property's all covered with building. So we had to, actually the tanks are still there, we filled them with sand.
then the post office moved across the street into the.
Yeah.
Yeah, then they moved the post office across the
Yeah.
street into
and
the,
You were probably in that old post office,
I remember it, yeah.
yeah.
Thanks for doing that. Appreciate it.
I don't remember much, I was very young. You're pretty soon you're gonna make me sound like I'm the patriarch of this whole outfit. I've been here an awful
I
long
never
time.
said that.
Well, I was just thinking, I think it's neat to where Alan works right now.
Oh, yeah.
Your T-shirt.
Speaking of motorcycles, yeah, after my Boeing career, they outsourced my division, so I'm working for a dealership in Linwood that sells the new Indians, and they sell Kawasaki, Yamaha, KTM, and BMW, plus assorted watercraft and towboats.
You sell Indians? I didn't realize the Indian was still made.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's made again, because since 2002 or so, others have tried, but then finally Polaris bought the rights, and so
Did that movie have any effect on it?
it may have, yeah. Burt Monroe, we sell T-shirts with the world's fastest Indian on there, you know, commemorating him, but, yeah, so I have a 2015 Indian Scout at home, besides that Kawasaki, so that was my
So
retirement.
why do you still
present.
call it by that name?
It's-
Indian.
Really? Oh,
Not politically correct name anymore.
you prefer Native Americans, huh?
Well, I don't know what they call it, but the ball clubs that have Indian names have to have changing their name.
Yeah, well, we still have the Redskins, so, you know, it is what it is, but,
I
yeah.
remember my wife talking about her cousins, Indians, back in teens. And they were pretty mean hogs that they rode around on. They all had Indian motorcycles. And they were very proud of their machines.
Yeah, well, they were there before Harley, you know, 1901, so, you know, by a couple of years.
So we should all go down to the dealership and still step up to the counter, I guess, and
Wouldn't be a bad idea. I don't work in sales, I work, you know, I manage their eBay site and do assorted vehicle deliveries and things like that,
but you enjoy yourself.
yeah, tell them Alan sent you, and
Okay,
they'll
so,
fix you up.
oh, okay.
Dull Allen.
Oh, Helen, there we go.
As you wish.
Anything else you want to tell us? Think you've covered it.
Whatever else you want to ask, that's all I can think of.
Does anyone have any questions?
Satisfied everybody.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your help.
Appreciate it. Thank you for getting in touch with us.
It's been a fun
I
journey.
guess the original question was you went to the Historical Society and, or the Library of Bellingham Museum, and they referred you to me.
Well, I've been there once, but ultimately it was through an internet search that I found Whatcom County Historical Society or something to that effect, and ultimately you contacted me after that, after they referred, you know, they forwarded my inquiry.
Well, we were very fortunate that you contacted us because you've given us a great deal more information about Everson than we ever would have had without you.
I feel like I won as much as anybody because, you know, it's taught me a lot, so it's been a win-win, I guess.
Great. That's what we like to hear.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.